the need for cities to align with the global biodiversity framework. And in particular, we're going to take a close look at one of the most avoidable sources of biodiversity loss, which is that of bird collisions with glass buildings. My name's Terry Townsend, Tang Ri. I'm an advisor to the Paulson Institute. And before we start, I'd like to recognize our esteemed speakers and panelists. So at the beginning, we will be joined via video by Wendy Paulson, who's Vice Chairman of the Paulson Institute, and our closing remarks will be delivered live from Beijing by Mr. Wang Shi, Founder and Honorary Chairman of China Vanke Company and Chairman of the Board of Vanke Foundation. Joining Wendy in the opening high-level session will be Mr. Jiang Qian, Deputy Director General of the Shenzhen Forestry Bureau. So welcome, Mr. Jiang. Our keynote presentations. Our keynote presentations will be delivered by Dr. Andrew Farnsworth from the Cornell Lab of Ornithology via Zoom. And then we have Assistant Professor Li Binbin from Duke Kunshan University, who is with us here on the front row. Li Binbin. And we also have Huang Xiumei from the Hong Kong Birdwatching Society. Our panel discussion will be chaired by John McKinnon, known as Ma Jingnong, or Lao Ma, as we like to call him these days. And the panelists include Hu Ping, the director of the Guangdong Neilingding Futian Nature Reserve. Sun Li, old friend, founder and deputy board director of the Mangrove Conservation Foundation. And Xiong Jian, manager of the research and development at Xianing South Glass Energy Saving Glass Company. We also have many others from government agencies, civil society, academia, and industry here today. So please let's give all of our speakers and panelists a very warm round of applause to welcome them. Thank you. Welcome. So why are cities important for biodiversity? Well, in my lifetime, nature, which is our life support system and the source of everything that is good about life, has been devastated by humans. So since 1970, the populations of vertebrates have fallen by an average of 69%. And the extinction rate of species is estimated to be up to 1,000 times the natural rate. And today, 96% of the biomass of all the mammals on Earth are made up of humans or the livestock on which we depend for food. And 70% of the biomass of all the birds in the world are domestic chickens. But now we have a new opportunity. So last year, under China's presidency of the UN Convention on Biological Diversity, more than 190 countries agreed to a new global biodiversity framework to slow the loss of and restore nature. To succeed will require the integration of biodiversity across all sectors of society, from national and subnational governments to businesses to cities and communities. And it's cities that we will focus on today. So cities are the fastest growing habitat on Earth. So it's vital that as they expand, we do our best to make them not only good habitat for people, but also for nature. We have a terrific lineup of speakers today, and so without further delay, I'd like to jump straight into the opening high-level session And up first, we have a video message from Wendy Paulson, the Vice Chairman of the Paulson Institute and Chairman of the Bobolink Foundation. So.
Hello everyone, I'm Wendy Paulson, Vice Chairman of the Paulson Institute. It's an honor to open this important event on cities and biodiversity as part of the World Coastal Forum in Yancheng, Jiangsu Province. I'd like to say a big thank you to our partners, Vanka Foundation, the Mangrove Conservation Foundation, Cornell University, and Duke-Shan University for making this event possible. If people are asked to name places that are important to nature, most will probably think of rainforests, national parks, or the oceans. Cities will probably not feature high on their list. Yet, as we will hear today, cities have a vital role to play in protecting biodiversity, particularly migratory birds. Approximately 56% of the world's human population lives in cities. That is predicted to increase to 70% by 2050. Because most of the world's major cities were established to support early trade routes, many of them are on the coast or along major rivers. Coasts and major rivers also happen to be important for migratory birds. They act as funnels and corridors for these incredible travelers, many of which span continents and hemispheres during their annual migrations. Around 80% of birds migrate at night. Most city dwellers are unaware of the extraordinary natural spectacle that happens in the skies above them as they sleep. Right now, we are in the peak of the autumn migration season. It is likely that last night, tens of thousands of birds, maybe even more, flew over Yancheng on their way south to non-breeding grounds as far away as Australia, New Zealand, and even Africa. From a migratory bird's perspective, cities are hostile places, posing many unnatural threats, from lack of suitable habitat for stopovers, to light pollution that interferes with their navigational systems, to reflective glass that can cause them to collide with buildings. As we will see, all of these threats can be reduced with a few simple, low-cost steps. When we understand the risks of biodiversity loss, we understand that investments to take such steps to protect and restore nature are among the best investments we can make. Cities are making impressive progress to align with the goals of the Paris Agreement on climate change, as well as net zero emission goals. There is an equally urgent need for cities to align with the new global biodiversity framework, endorsed by more than 190 countries in December 2022 under China's presidency of the UN Convention on Biological Diversity. Only then can we aim for truly sustainable cities. There's a great lineup of speakers for today's event, and I look forward to hearing about the conclusions of your discussions. Thank you, and have a great forum. Share, share.
So, good introduction. And next, I'd like to invite Mr. Jiang Qian, the Deputy Director General of the Shenzhen Forestry Bureau, to deliver his opening remarks.
各位来宾、女士们、先生们、朋友们，大家下午好。今天非常高兴来到美丽的滨海城市盐城，参加生物多样性鸟类友好型城市发展的专题研讨会，与大家共同了解和分享来自全球各地的专家学者们在生物多样性保护方面的研究成果和工作经验。我作为对生物多样性鸟类友好型城市发展这个话题十分感兴趣，今天也非常荣幸的有机会与在座的各位学者、嘉宾进行交流研讨，相信一定会受益匪浅。深圳是一座年轻的城市，也是一座充满活力、 和创新精神的城市。深圳建市40年来，历届市政府高度重视生态文明建设，将生态保护的理念融入到经济建设和城市发展的各个领域。全过程先后获得了国家园林城市、国际花园城市、联合国环境保护全球500家等荣誉称号。2022年12月，在第7届全球地方政府和城市峰会上，又获得了生物多样性魅力城市的称号，并入选自然城市行动平台。为了保护生物多样性，深圳市始终坚持生态优先的理念，形成了一半山水、一半城、山海连城绿色发展的城市生态格局。早在2005年，深圳市就将50%以上的城市陆域面积划入了基本生态控制线，城市生态安全格局和生态系统完整性得到了有效保护。近年来，深圳市大力实施湿地保护修复重点工程，积极推进山海连城、绿美深圳生态建设和公园城市建设，努力打造山海连城和美宜居的现代化滨海生态城市。目前，深圳市已划定生态保护红线872平方公里，建立自然保护地23个，总面积443公顷，占陆域国土面积的22%。全市森林面积777平方公里，森林覆盖率39.2%，湿地总面积3.48万公顷。深圳市自然资源禀赋优越，鸟类种类丰富，每年约有10万只候鸟再生越冬。最新共记录到野生鸟类382种。经过多年努力，实施深圳湾红树林湿地保护修复，再生栖息的鸟类数量和种类均有明显上升，其中包括 IUCN 红色名录极危鸟种和多种国家1、2级保护动物。例如，深圳的明星鸟黑脸琵鹭，2022年在深圳湾湿地记录到361只，使深圳成为全球第3大栖息地。2023年2月，深圳福田红树林湿地被正式列入国际重要湿地名录。深圳在湿地和鸟类保护方面取得了显著成效。在重点加强福田红树林湿地生态保护的同时，对深圳湾整体的海岸线也进行了统筹的规划，包括修复了福田红树林生态公园作为生态缓冲区，并且结合深圳湾公园等作为生态性绿色滨海长廊，体现了生态与人文相融合。深圳在社会化参与生态保护方面也做了积极的尝试，红树林基金会等一批机构长期支持红树林湿地保护修复、环境教育等工作。在深圳这座中国人口密度最大的繁华都市中，鸟类数量和种类不断提升，是深圳各级政府高度重视生物多样性保护，以及深圳社会各界携手共建鸟类友好型城市的结果。而这些成果应该被更广泛的共享。目前，深圳市正积极推进国际红树林中心的建设。下一步，深圳将以此为契机，建立开放包容、共建互利的红树林和滨海蓝碳生态系统的国际合作机制，推动红树林整体性保护、系统性修复和可持续利用的国际合作和联合行动，努力将国际红树林中心打造成深圳新的城市生态名片。我们期待与各个城市共同努力，结合联合国2030年可持续发展议程，以创新引领城市可持续发展为主题，实现经济、社会、环境的协调发展，在全国以至全球范围内推动生物多样性友好、鸟类友好的新城市发展模式，助力昆明框架目标的实现。谢谢大家。
Thank you, Mr. Jiang. Integrating biodiversity into urban planning really requires the full commitment and support of government. So it's wonderful to hear your commitment to build on Shenzhen's international reputation as a pioneer in innovation, to also pioneer the integration of nature into urban planning. So thank you very much for that. So that concludes the opening high-level session, and now we will move into the keynote technical presentations, of which we have 3. And first, I'd like to invite Dr. Andrew Farnsworth of the Cornell Lab of Ornithology to provide us with an overview of the issue of light pollution and bird collisions in North America, and to tell us about some of the innovative solutions being taken forward in cities to tackle this unnecessary loss of migratory birds. And I want to say a particular thank you to Andrew, who's joining us live from New York, and it's just after 4 a.m. Obviously, as a birder, this is probably nothing to him, but in any case, I think anyone getting up at 4 a.m. to deliver a presentation deserves our special thanks. So thank you, Andrew, and over to you.
Thank you so much, Terry. Thank you to the Paulson Institute. Thank you to all those of you in the audience. I appreciate your attention, and I'm thankful for this opportunity. I'd like to say very quickly, I'm speaking obviously on behalf of work that I have done, as well as work that my esteemed colleagues have done in other universities of the U.S., especially at Cornell, where I'm based. And the work that I'm talking about today, the research I'm talking about today, is both my own and theirs. So there's quite a team of people. And really what I'd like to speak to you about today is this opportunity that we have to inform our understanding of our sustainability options and how to do conservation, in particular in cities, and how to employ the science that we can gather, in particular about birds and how they interact with cities, and studying them at large scale. So I'll be talking about a project called BirdCast. BirdCast is a collaborative effort between computer scientists and ornithologists, scientists that study birds, to understand the spectacle of bird migration, and then obviously take the science that we can learn about that and employ that in terms of conservation. So let me begin. As Wendy had mentioned in her introductory remarks, bird migration is an incredible, diverse phenomenon. And of the world's bird species, approximately 20% at least, possibly more, are migratory. An array of those migrants you'll see depicted in this slide. These migrants are species that you would see, for example, in China in periods such as now, fall migration. Now, of the birds that occur in China, about 60% or more are migratory, meaning that they will breed in one area, spend their non-breeding periods in another area, and pass through particular habitats during the periods in between. Importantly, of those birds that are migrants in China, about 80% migrate at night. And this is very similar to the percentage of birds that migrate at night in North America, in other parts of the world. So these movements mostly occur under the cover of darkness. Birds are adapted to make these movements in quite unique ways. The ways that they perceive and sense the world are tuned to be able to migrate at night and to do so effectively and in enormous numbers, as I'll tell you in a moment. Now, we've known about these nocturnal movements for quite some time before the advent of various optical and electrical technologies in the 20th century. The ability to see birds, for example, at night flying across the face of the full moon, was one of the ways that we learned that birds were migrating, that there were numbers of birds migrating, that they did so in a diversity of places, whether in coastal locations or inland locations, and that they did so in varying degrees depending on weather conditions, atmospheric conditions, and obviously time of year. Now, this is one way to study migration. Of course, it is limited in that the full moon is available only very rarely over the course of a migration season, and when it is available in clear skies, it may not be during a period when bird migration is actually occurring. So, considering newer methods, For example, as we move through the 20th century and into the 21st, we use not only our direct sensing capabilities with our own eyes, but also remote sensing capabilities, for example, those of radar. And what I show you here is a mosaic image of the North American, the US weather surveillance radar system, the NextRad system, that's been in operation for much of the past 35 years, that is sensing the atmosphere above the United States. And in this sample image from the spring, what you're seeing is 143 radars that are sampling the atmosphere and detecting a variety of things, not just meteorology. The places where you see the very blocky and irregular patterns, the yellows, bright yellows and reds and greens, that represents precipitation, meteorological activity, the boundaries between air masses that are warm and cold, for example. All of the other information that you see here, the very light blues, the very uniform patterns of blues and greens, that is biological activity, and it is dominated by birds. And the idea that we can use this sort of a sensor network that is continuously surveilling the atmosphere and highlight with machine learning, for example, what is meteorology, remove that, and talk only about the biology that's present, offers a unique opportunity for us to survey what's happening above the planet, in this case, over the contiguous US, whether in rural or urban areas alike. We can quantify that biological signal and then understand how many birds are migrating at night, a time otherwise that we would have information largely unavailable to us, as I mentioned previously. So what can we do when we can begin to quantify that information? We begin to understand the magnitude, the sheer enormous numbers of birds that are migrating by night. In the United States, every spring, represented in the green arrows, there are between 2.5 and 3.5 billion birds that migrate north and cross the southern and northern transects of the United States. In the fall, that number grows even larger to between 4 and 5 billion birds. This ability to characterize the massive movements using this radar technology offers an incredible opportunity to us. Yes, to understand the magnitude of the movement from the perspective of how much biodiversity is on the move in a particular place and time that the radars can survey. It also offers us the opportunity to look at those changes over time and to examine the details of what sorts of patterns relate to these massive movements. And following that, being able to make forecasts of when bird migration will occur in high intensity, and then monitor that forecast and observe the predictions. Birdcast has been able to do exactly that. In the last 5 years in particular, we've made incredible advances in our abilities to relate, for example, weather information about the temperature, wind speed, and direction of the atmosphere with intensity of bird migration from those radar data, and produce graphics like this that tell us, very similar to what you might see on a weather map, where the intensity of a particular variable, in this case bird migration, is going to be greatest in the areas where the whites and yellows are, or the heat map, if you will, and lowest in the areas where the purples and the black colors are. So with this in mind, we can understand that, say, during the spring of 2022, on this night, we were forecasting over 400 million birds to migrate on a single night over the contiguous US. Now, in addition to the ability to predict, we can also use the radar network in near real time to extract the information about how many birds are aloft. So for that same night I mentioned in spring, you can see what had actually happened from the radar perspective. And it turns out that the magnitude was even greater than we predicted. Nearly 750 million birds were migrating on this night. The idea of being able to make forecasts and then make predictions and then see the predictions in observed maps in near real time offers us a very powerful opportunity, both to engage the public that's interested in birds to understand what's passing overhead on a given night, as well as to be able to inform various stakeholders that may include the aviation industry, the energy industry, and also cities and other urban areas that are seeking to enhance their applications of this information towards sustainable and biodiversity goals. Finally, we we also present that information in different ways. So you saw the approach from the geographical perspective. We also can look a little bit deeper in the U.S. in terms of political organization. We have states and counties that are representing basically geopolitical boundaries. We can examine these and understand at much smaller scales what migration is doing in those particular places. And we see, for example, just a few nights ago, the massive movement that can occur over a particular place, talking again over 100 million birds in a particular area, their speed, their direction, the altitude at which they fly, information that's incredibly valuable, yes, as a biologist seeking to understand how birds migrate, but also as someone interested in conservation, in understanding at what altitude are birds moving above the landscape, and at what times, what speeds, and what numbers, and how does that relate to seasonal changes? How does it change historically? All this information could be potentially very useful to us for understanding how to protect birds. Now, this type of technology, the radar that we use, is not simply a U.S. technology. It is occurring around the world, and in fact, it occurs to probably its greatest extent in China. You have an amazing, extensive coverage using weather surveillance radar of the atmosphere above China. The potential to do similar kinds of research relating the bird migration that is occurring as detected on radar with machine learning to be able to quantify that and remove the meteorology. You have made incredible advances in the abilities to do this over China and to do similar kinds of work. We have collaborators, the Beijing Institute of Technology and other locations, where we have discussed this, we have seen their successes, and the power of the network in China is enormous to do this kind of bird migration monitoring and produce this type of information. Now, why is this important from the applied urban perspective, in particular in coastal cities? When birds are migrating at night, they no longer have an open sky to move as they have for much of the past tens of thousands or hundreds of thousands of years, a sky free of obstacles. Instead, there is enormous human infrastructure that now enters their airspace and with which they must deal on a nightly basis when they are migrating. When they deal with this airspace and these new human infrastructures that are there, there can be enormously devastating impacts. The numbers of birds that collide with structures at night and in the mornings after migration is enormous. In the U.S. alone, for collisions with buildings in particular in cities, it's approximately 340 million birds that are killed in collisions annually. That number is almost equaled by the number of birds killed in simple single-story or low-story residences outside of urban areas, nearly 253 million birds annually. The numbers are huge and approximate potentially up to 1 billion birds lost every year in the United States when you look across the spectrum of additional structures with which they collide. An enormous potential problem for birds migrating at night. Now, the issue of bird window collisions is one that we've understood for a significant part of the 20th century and growing most of the 21st century. A recent publication, which features one of my esteemed colleagues and speakers from whom you will hear shortly, highlights this issue is not just an issue in the United States, it is an issue in the US, in China, in Europe, all around the planet, wherever there is human infrastructure, wherever there are birds migrating at night, and birds on the move, which is everywhere globally. It is an issue, and it is a serious issue. And as Terry mentioned, it is an issue over which we have some very interesting and powerful control potentially. We do not want to see more instances of large numbers of birds and diverse arrays of birds killed in these types of collisions. Instead, we want to understand what is at play, why this is happening, and how we can control it. In this case, there is an enormous component that relates to collisions that comes from artificial light at night. Many of you may have seen or heard about the tribute in light, the memorial in New York City to the lives lost during the September 11th terrorist attacks in 2001. That memorial, for more than 20 years, has included 2 bright lights ascending skyward that offer a very powerful, emotional, and societally important memorial to those lives lost. These bright lights at night attract enormous numbers of birds at times, and what you see in this video is approximately 2,000 to 3,000 small songbirds migrating at night, attracted and disoriented by these beams of light. This pattern is characteristic where we see migration occurring and when we see light pollution at night. We see this attraction and we see this disorientation. And in urban areas, this is absolutely, as much as it is in rural areas, a component of why birds are colliding with buildings. They are attracted to particular areas where human infrastructure is that is illuminated at night. They are disoriented by that light because of their sensory ecology and inability to deal with the powerful stimulus light offers, and then often that leads to collision. We can see the results from that radar perspective I was mentioning. On the left, we have a 10 o'clock snapshot of the bird migration above the Tribune and Light of Manhattan. About 20 minutes later, as a migratory pulse arrives at night, we can see that intensity of migration above the site, the attraction to the light, has increased by 2 orders of magnitude. And this is just the beginning. It's an enormous, enormous movement. We can also investigate this movement from the perspective of looking not just at the light, but also using thermal technology, a thermal imager, to understand, well, what happens when we turn off those lights? What do birds do? If we look at this image taken just a few weeks ago, we can see early on there are large numbers of birds again in the beams. Approximately 1 minute later, when we have turned off the lights, you'll notice that the numbers of birds have decreased incredibly. Another 2 minutes after that, we see only a scant number of birds migrating, mostly in the same direction, a very powerful indication of what it means to turn those lights off. We lose the attraction, we lose the disorientation, and birds are allowed to continue to move on their way. Now, we saw this pattern numerous times. What happens when you remove light from a particular scenario? On the right is the image from the paper we published in 2017, showing this lights on and lights off perspective. The green, when the lights at the Tribune are on, the gray, when they are off, and a periodicity of bird behavior relative to that lights on and off, including very increased numbers of birds when the lights are on, immediate decreases in numbers when the lights are off. In terms of bird behavior and their migration in flight, much lower speeds, birds circling when the lights are on, birds traveling faster when the lights are off without circling, and a local behavior that indicates disorientation that birds use at night, flight calls, increases tremendously in numbers of flight calls during periods when the lights are on, and decreases to almost 0 when the lights are off, highlighting this periodicity of what light does when it's on, and immediately how bird migration patterns and behavior changes with lights off. Now, that is outdoor light, exterior light. We've also found a very similar pattern from a Chicago study that was published just a couple of years ago, looking at bird collisions in a particular building relative to light and weather. And it turned out that turning off individual lights inside buildings, the illuminated area of a facade, even makes an enormous difference. That the number of birds killed could have been reduced by 50% by reducing the light output from those windows 50%. And mortality, in fact, could have been a lot worse had all of the windows been illuminated in the building. The power of turning outside and inside light off to reduce collisions is enormous, and is obviously something that is much more under our control than an array of other conservation challenges we may have. Now, how might we inform this ability of when and where to turn off lights at night, for example? We can use those forecasts that I mentioned from radar that characterize the intense migration of birds in the United States and offer alerts to when high-intensity migration is going to occur to allow people, business owners, buildings, municipal areas to turn off lights actively, to advocate and to compel their citizens and their workers to turn off lights on a particular night approaching, make a forecast of when that should occur. A very powerful opportunity for advocacy and action. We've seen this in a number of places very successfully. In Texas, where enormous migration occurs in the United States, 1 out of every 3 birds in the spring migrating in the U.S. passes through Texas. 1 out of every 4 in the U.S. migrating in the fall passes through Texas. We can see that the advocacy that we can employ with this science that we understand to turn lights out will allow us to engage this way. For example, before, when Houston is illuminated, one of the brightest cities and highest risk for exposing to birds to light pollution at night, with the lights out action that is based on the migration forecasts, the lights go dark and allow us to save birds at night. A very simple and very much a high contrast pattern of what is the before, what is the after, and what type of advocacy is possible. Additionally, to that sort of effort of very much proximate action, what might we do tomorrow or 3 days from now to protect birds migrating at night by turning off lights? There are other pieces of legislation, other tools in the United States recently that might be informative and important. In China, for example, to protect birds migrating at night and enhance biodiversity. Very recently in the city of New York, legislation passed to dim lights at night during migration periods in the spring and the fall, and also build buildings that are more friendly to birds, that have materials, for example, that are not reflective glass, that disorient and kill birds in enormous numbers at night and during the day. Changing facades, altering the way that these bird-friendly materials are deployed to great effect in areas where green roofs are occurring, eliminating glass railings or other hazardous elements. These are all part of the laws now that guide the building of structures in New York City. The power of being able to employ this kind of a tool to protect migrants and more broadly to protect biodiversity in cities is just one of the ways we can think going forward about how to be sustainable. To bring it to more of a local note, thinking about the number of species that are observed in the areas where you are presently sitting. The diversity, the species richness is enormous, approximating 300, 400 species in a particular location, including some very rare species like yellow-breasted bunting, and also some species that are increasingly challenged and vulnerable and threatened in their movements. For example, far eastern curlew. These species occur where you are, and the ability to think about ways to protect those by doing simple actions and also smart planning when it comes to eliminating light pollution and altering bird-friendly materials to be included in buildings, incredibly important opportunity. And I'll highlight again from an even broader perspective, outside of your region, but thinking in the East Asian flyway, the numbers of birds that are crossing over, for example, urban areas and developed areas on this map, where you see the bright yellow patterns of light pollution at night, and in white, where you see the routes of birds that travel past them. You can see globally that there are many areas of overlap between bird migration, humanity, and light pollution and urbanization. In particular, in the East Asian flyway, there is an enormous opportunity to address this potential hazard, eliminating light pollution, altering our designs to be more bird-friendly, to make a huge impact in terms of protecting birds that are migrants, and migrants in a regional and global capacity, and also more broadly to protect biodiversity. Of course, the primary reason we would like to do this, biodiversity as a sustainable tool going forward, is essential to our future survival. At a more specific level to birds, we have seen tremendous declines, similar to those across many animals over the last 50 years. In the U.S. alone, nearly 3 billion birds lost from the total population of breeding birds. We want to turn that around and reverse the way that curve has been traveling. And this opportunity, by eliminating light pollution, altering our building construction methods, is an enormously powerful and relatively simple and targeted approach that can have an enormous impact. the added value of going lights out and altering our materials can be enormous. Aside from just saving birds, we have huge energy implications. Reducing light pollution alone reduces one of the largest costs to commercial operations in the US and around the world. Also, continuing toward our path of going carbon net zero, reduced usage of electricity to power these lights is essential to achieving those goals. Furthermore, light pollution and loss of dark conditions is a key element in the human health condition. Light pollution at night is detrimental to humans and human well-being, and reducing it is a positive thing. And finally, from an ecosystem perspective, thinking beyond birds, reducing bird mortality with these bird-friendly designs and operations is fundamental, in particular in urban areas, to enhance and sustain biodiversity and to create a healthy green infrastructure. With that, I'd like to close my remarks and again say thank you for all of those involved in the Birdcast project, for your audience this evening. This work has been funded by a number of different groups in the United States, including Lyle Hill Foundation, Leon Levy, National Science Foundation, and Eamon G. Carter, and also supported by the work of Amazon that allows us to do the computational power behind the work you've seen here. I thank you very much, and I appreciate your attention.
Well, thank you, Andrew. What a terrific presentation. I love the way that you in North America use the weather radar to help engage the public about the scale of the migration that's happening over their heads as they sleep. And I think this is a really essential tool in terms of building support, public support for the policies and measures that are needed to support this biodiversity. And it was enormously encouraging to hear about the initiatives being taken in some cities, such as New York and others, to help support these migratory birds, all of which are relatively cheap and simple, especially if implemented at the design stage for buildings, and yet highly effective. And I thank you again for delivering such a powerful presentation at 4 a.m. So thank you. So now we've heard about the experience in North America. And next up, I'd like to invite Assistant Professor Li Binbin of Duke Kunshan University to provide an overview of the status of research in China on this issue, including the role of volunteers, citizen scientists, in helping to build the evidence base. So over to you, Binbin.
谢谢 Terry， 也很高兴这次能听到 Andrew 现场的这个 presentation。我们之前合作一直都是线上。那我看，因为大家从他的这个报告里已经听到了，北美开始关注鸟状比较早，而中国比较晚。虽然我们有很多的一些国际来宾在，但是我觉得为了去把这个概念更好的跟大家去讲述，那我这次我的这个报告就全部用中文来进行。第一个是怎么开始关注这个事情的？其实这个是我们学校昆山杜克大学，其实离这里开车的话只有2个半小时。那我刚到这个学校17年的时候，知道这个学校是全国第一个全体建筑是被 LEED 认证，就是绿色节能建筑认证。那我当时觉得很开心，说我们学校这么重视环境。但是没有想到，在我到了学校1个月之内，接连发生了很多起的鸟撞，一个绿色的校园发起了这么多起鸟撞。当时我一直以为鸟撞其实只发生在北美，但当我回到中国的时候，发现我们居然也有鸟撞。而且更重要的是，虽然我不是一个狂热的观鸟爱好者，但我希望见到更多的一些鸟类的物种。但我没想到，我见到第一只我的黄尾岩的时候，它是一只撞到了玻璃上没有救活的个体。那到底这个事情除了在我们学校会这样，其他地方会怎么样？那这里给大家播放2段视频。第一段视频是发生在青岛，那这个是一个火锅店的门口。第二个的话，其实是在成都，那这个是他们建的绿道， 而很多的一些城市建筑，包括公园，我们现在特别爱使用玻璃围栏、玻璃的访客中心。但其实没想到，在这么好的一个环境里面，我们建了很多大面积玻璃的建筑，却导致了很多的鸟的死亡，尤其是一些爱集群飞的这些鸟类。那它们也许是被猛禽驱赶，也许是没有办法去认识出这个是建筑，而导致了撞击。那在刚开始的这个介绍里面，安主其实介绍了鸟撞的其中的一个原因，也是非常重要的一个原因，就是夜晚的灯光。那这里面我想着重去讲述的是另外一个原因，就是我们建筑上面大面积使用的玻璃。那玻璃对于鸟来说有2个迷惑的作用。在特定的光线条件下，有很多的一些玻璃会显示出透明，尤其是我们的转角、直角的这个建筑，或者是玻璃的连廊。我们现在特别爱在2个建筑中间建一个连廊，而且全部是玻璃的。那对于鸟来说，它认为这个是透明的，可以飞过去的，所以这是第一种迷惑它们导致撞击的行为。第二个其实就是我们玻璃会导致的一些反光。那尤其是很多的一些这个玻璃，我们从这个玻璃里面可以看到自己。那很多时候鸟看到的其实是天空，是植被，它认为是它可以继续飞或者继续去走、继续往前去的一片栖息地。那同样它也会被迷惑而导致撞击。所以后来我发现这个事情在中国了解的非常少。那我们于是从18年先在我们学校开始鸟撞的调查，因为当时没有一个科学研究发生在中国。那同时在19年的时候，成都的朱磊博士他也建立了一个随机的汇报的平台，从全国去收集鸟撞的信息。那从2021年，朱磊博士我和 CYCAN 我们一起开启了第一个全国的鸟撞调查。那到2022年，我们和几个机构一起联合成立了全国防鸟撞行动网络。那全国防鸟撞行动网络现在的发起和构成主要有我们学校，包括山水自然保护中心、自然之友、守护荒野、红树林基金会、乐观地球，也受到了不同机构的一些资助，让我们来去做这件事情。那其实这个网络最重要的想要去了解，就是我们到底能不能去推行一个新的城市的概念，就是鸟类友好型城市。那这个网络最主要的要做4个事情。第一个非常重要的就是基于公民科学调查而去全面了解中国鸟撞的现状。那通过我们基于这个鸟撞调查，可以让很多的公众来参与，那提到这个公众意识的提升。那同时我们希望去促进防鸟撞的一些改造行动，更重要的是把这些防鸟撞以及鸟类友好型城市可以放到行业政策和相关的一些规定当中。那我们先简单介绍一下我们这几年做鸟撞调查发现的一些基本的一些情况。我们从2021年春季开始进行调查，这是中国第一个，也是现在规模最大的系统性的鸟撞调查，而且是基于公民科学的。我们其实对于公民要求的非常的高，大家也许参加1次调查很容易，但是我们会要求他们在每年迁徙季每周连续5天、连续4周至少去进行鸟撞的巡查。那同时我们也有各个合作伙伴负责不同片区的志愿者的调动和组织。那可以看到，从我们这个参与人数，从2021年161个个人再加上团体，一直到我们2023年494人或者团体来参与这个调查。那今年秋季还在进行当中。那如果把我们的调查量再进行累积，按照每一栋观察1天这样来去看的话，那基本上在2023年我们1次调查也达到了17000多的一个调查量，那涉及超过大概550栋的这个楼。那所以我们在积累大量的数据来去回答，到底鸟撞在中国是一个什么样的现状，有哪些鸟类可能更容易撞，到底有哪些因素是推动中国鸟撞发生的一些制约因素。这个跑得好快。 那我们现在的调查一共涉及了32个省级行政区，150多个城市。那可以看到，大部分的这些城市其实还在东部，我们还是人口居住比较多的这些地方。但非常重要的，也是我们这次的这个主题之一。那在我们重要的这个东亚到利西亚的迁飞区，同时我们有其他的一些城市参与了调查。当然了，我们中国不是只有一个迁飞区，我们有4个迁飞区，所以其实在中国任何一个地方来进行调查，都有利于我们来去了解到底鸟状是什么样的一个情况。那我们会发现，其实鸟状的种类还是非常多，尤其这里面还会有不少的一些保护鸟类，比如说红喉歌渠、蓝喉歌渠、鲜八色鸫状的也很多，松雀鹰、北鹰鸮、红鞋绣眼鸟、小太平鸟。那我们发现有一些鸟可能撞的会更多一些，比如说像我们现在排名第1的黄眉柳莺，还有虎斑地鸫、灰背鸫、褐柳莺、朱颈斑鸠、毛斑黄莺、红喉鸡翁、斑纹鸟、暗绿绣眼鸟，很多其实看下来还是以林鸟为主。那同时，虽然我们现在还在积累数据，但是为了可以让更多的志愿者了解到他们参与调查的情况是什么，也让有更多的公众可以去了解到底鸟状的一个现状，其实我们在每一年都会发布年度的这个调查的报告。那我们会发现，在秋天和冬天，鸟状的频率其实是不一样的，而且它的地域分布也会有差异。那更重要的是，大部分其实发生鸟状的这些种类其实是迁徙鸟类。那大概65%的撞击事件都是发生在迁徙鸟类当中。那其中有一些类群，它们撞击的更多。那包括一些鸫、柳莺，还有我们说很多的翁。那这些是撞击前3的类群。那同时，我们建筑到底哪些原因会导致更多的鸟撞？第一个其实就是玻璃比例，我们发现非常明显的一个趋势，随着玻璃的比例增加，那最后面的这个其实就是80%到100%，撞击的几率是最高的。同时，我们一直认为，也许可能是摩天大厦撞击的很多，但其实也并不是这样。我们发现低层建筑鸟撞风险更高，比如说小于7层的这个鸟撞，它的这个概率可能要高于大于10层、20层的这个概率。所以不光要关注一些大型的商业建筑，我们很多的一些低层的民营建筑也是一个高发区。那同时周边环境是什么样子？我们发现如果要是没有植被的话，鸟撞的概率更高。但当然有植被并不代表不会发生鸟撞，其实也有很高的概率，尤其是有一些树木在周边，或者是草地，或者是一些其他的灌木，因为很多鸟会栖息在这附近。那在这个情况，如果周边有比较多的大面积的建筑，那更容易发生鸟撞。那我们在知道了一些简单的结论之后，尤其是很多的志愿者，他们在一次调查之中就发现了有鸟撞，他们其实有非常迫切的需求，我怎么样来去改变现状？那这里面其实就涉及到了改造。那其实对于鸟撞这个事情，尤其是我们知道，如果玻璃会是很重要的一个因素的话，玻璃改造其实非常简单，在外面贴一层膜，但是这个膜不是随便贴，它其实有个重要的原则，叫做5×5原则。如果我们只是随意的贴1、2个图案，对于鸟来说，它还是认为它可以飞过去，或者它看到的还是一些反射的树木或者是天空。我们需要做的就是制造出一些图案，让它觉得飞不过去。那对于大部分鸟来说，如果它的间距小于5厘米，它是认为飞不过去的。那当然也跟这个它的点的大小有关系，我们认为是大于1厘米直径。那在这种情况下，我们既可以贴比如说这种点阵，或者贴一些竖线或者横线。那有的时候我们玻璃自己本身就可能带有一些釉彩图案或者石刻，也可以达到这种情况。那当然很多人会提到猛禽贴纸，猛禽贴纸是传统大家认为是可以的，但其实证明不有效。如果只是贴1、2个猛禽不会有作用，但如果你把猛禽贴的间距小于5厘米会有用处，所以最重要的还是5厘米这个概念，好吧？那我们在 做这个整个的一些改造的支持的时候，我们其实也会去征集个人或者集体的一些改造意愿，我们会对它进行科学的指导以及资金的匹配和支持。那后续我们鼓励它继续进行监测，来去评估到底鸟状是不是有效的减少。那就像红树林基金会，其实在他们深圳的这个地方就做了改造。那小火山它做了几年的这个监测之后，就发现前2年有用，为什么到第3年又开始有变化？那其实这都是非常重要的一些数据来告诉我们怎么样做可以更好。那当然我们更欣喜的是看到很多的志愿者在参与完这些调查之后真正的开始了行动。那包括很多的其实是发生在学校，包括有的是在游泳馆，有的是在公共的一些设施上面，有的是在学校里面，那还有的一些是在这个票太快了。比如说上海的鹿鸣学校，还有杭州的云谷学校，会发现大家用的方法不一样。只要遵从5×5，其实有很多可以艺术发挥的地方。所以这里面贴的也许并不是点或者线，但是小朋友们或者是学生或者其他人，他用艺术的方式制造出了另外一种玻璃的呈现形式，那它也是有效的。当然我们也看到了有很多的一些商用的改造，那比如说在上海诺亚财富中心，深圳它的腾讯滨海大厦，然后包括我们学校图书馆，整个它的上面已经用釉彩去做了所有的横条纹的处理。那我们当然最希望的其实还是在改造之前这些变化就会发生。那我们学校当时处理了这样子，在我们提出了鸟状这个问题2期建设之前，设计方提出，第一要减少玻璃的使用，第二个增加装饰线条和彩油玻璃，第三是减少连廊等可造成飞跃错觉的结构。所以更好的方式其实在改造之前，我们在设计我们的建筑和城市的时候就有所变化。那也看到有一些其他的机构现在在做一些设计，比如说山水自然保护中心，他们做了仿鸟状的贴纸图案库，所以大家可以直接的下载来使用。那包括腾讯现在在设计的一款仿鸟状贴纸设计工具，那后面也会公开向公众来使用。那这样子大家可以更容易去设计哪一些贴纸可能对自己更有帮助。那对于社会影响力来说，我们觉得这2年持续去做这个事情，也让我很有动力的，就是确实我们发现了比较大的一个变化。第一，先是有很多的一些机构，他们自发的开始进行鸟状议题的一些讨论，那包括不同的学校、机构，还有自然博物馆。那第二个的话，就是媒体上面的一些报道，我们在一些主流的媒体上面，他们渐渐的开始关注城市鸟状的问题，那包括新华社、中国环球电影、视网等等。那我们做了这么一个简单的统计，就是到底关于鸟状的这个调查，关于鸟状这件事情，中国媒体关注是什么样子？我们发现在2011年一直到2016年年底的时候，几乎没有提过鸟状这个词。那渐渐从17年、18年，我们开始关注这件事情，尤其是我们开始进行全国首次系统性鸟状调查开始，新闻报道量开始剧增。那接着通过我们的报告发布，以及第2次以及后面的一些调查的开启，其实媒体的关注在日益的增多。那其实这个可能是更重要的一点，就是我们的大众的宣传的口径开始注意到鸟状这个议题。那同时，这个鸟状调查以及我们的这个行动也得到了COP15 生物多样性100家全球典型案例，那也获得了波洛科学奖、生态奖的这个奖励。那其实大家还是认为这是一件有意义的科学研究。那我们认为，在这里面，为什么中国起步的晚，但是其实我们对这件事情的重视，包括社会上面的反响，还是让很多国际的合作者感到的惊讶。尤其是刚才Andrew也提到了我们这篇文章，那我们是跟美国的这个 Texas Lights Out 还有这个 FLAP 3个公民这个调查项目并驾齐驱。那现在中国作为北美之外唯一一个有这种大面积的这个公民调查的项目被列在了这个研究里面。那我们其实希望的就是3个目标：第一个，可不可以找到更多的一些鸟类友好型的材料；第二个，我们可不可以有更多的鸟类的友好的设计；那同时我们还要进行夜间灯光的管理。那这3点才可以保障鸟类在我们 所在的这个城市里可以长期的生存下去，而且当他们迁徙过境的时候，这里不再是他们的死亡陷阱。那更让我们欣喜的是，在鸟撞这个事情持续的研究和关注底下，也有很多的一些标准和一些相应的政策慢慢开始吸纳了鸟撞这个概念。比如说，在北京绿色建筑评价标准里面提到了大面积的玻璃幕墙会导致鸟类撞击，鼓励减少使用。虽然是自愿性的标准，但是已经列入了鸟撞这个议题。第二个，在这个升屏障结构的技术标准里面，其实也提到了说要设置鸟撞标识。那尤其是很多升屏障其实用到的是玻璃。那深圳更让我们欣喜，我们是发现在生物多样性保护行动计划里面也提到了以深圳湾为重点区域，开展城市高楼对迁徙鸟类的影响评估，探索开展鸟类友好建筑设计改造指引等，减少鸟撞等生态事故的发生。所以这个可能是很多包括国际上面都会觉得中国行动很快的一点，从我们开始关注这个问题，到慢慢不同的行业标准和一些相关的指导意见开始重视鸟撞。那我本身其实在开启鸟撞之前，我的大部分时间是花在我们西南山地远离人烟的这个地方。那当时我觉得生物多样性保护最重要的地方是这些荒野的地区。那城市一直确实就像温迪说的，是被我排除在外的地方，回来以后我就变成很宅的一个人。但是后来我发现，生物多样性保护怎么样能做好？其实就像这次生物多样性公约提到的重要的议题，生物多样性保护的主流化。那主流化是谁来做主流化？并不是科学家或者是真正的一些保护行动者，更多的是社会，更多的是一些其他的一些企业类的私营部门的公众，他们对于生物多样性保护上面的意识的变化。但是我们的荒野离我们大家太远了，没有人可能会有大段的时间泡在荒野里面，大家接触最多的还是城市。而我恰恰发现，就是鸟撞这个事情，为什么会有这么多的公众一直愿意来参与？因为他们发现这个事情离他太近了，他们认为是家的地方，居然会变成另外一个生命它的死亡的地点。那更重要的是，保护的逻辑链在这个问题上非常的短。栖息地丧失和破碎化是最大的推动原因，但是这个的解决依赖于很多不同的因素，但是鸟撞这一点不一样，因为鸟撞跟每一个人相关，你居住的场所、你工作的场所，任何的一个变化都会减少鸟类的死亡。所以对于很多公众来说，他参与了调查，发现了鸟撞，可以立马进行改造，接着可以用自己的监测评估继续来去评价是不是它是有效的。那这是一个完整的保护逻辑链，可以每个人都来进行。那很多的志愿者在参与了一期的调查之后，第一次发现它跟这个城市有了连接，注意到了鸟类真的存在，鸟类真的会撞，还会意识到城市里面很多其他的问题，比如说流浪猫，比如说植被的一些问题。那这里面才是通过他们的参与，真正意识会有变化，而且会去行动起来的一个很好的途径。因此我们也坚持说要以公民科学为主的调查方式来去继续推动鸟撞的研究。虽然这个数据积累起来很慢，但是我们觉得这会是一个很好的方式来做到真正的变化。那更重要的是，可能通过鸟撞这件事情，我们真正去思考到底我们想要什么样的一个城市。那我们现在去到的城市千篇一律，大家来到盐城可能会觉得盐城长得跟其他的城市也很像，但是其实我们的城市本来应该有它自己的一个文化底蕴在，它的一个历史底蕴在。那比如说现在我们其实在的都是在我们长江下游三角洲的地方，有非常漂亮的水乡，我们传统的这些建筑，但这些建筑和一些文化及历史在我们现在的城市设计里面被摒弃了。我们可能喜欢的都是单一的高楼大厦、大面积的玻璃幕墙。那是不是我们对于城市的设计，我们的审美会有变化？那同样并不是特别多的一些灯光的使用，反而会让很多人觉得这样子的夜景可能更温馨、更高级。就像在上海去年，由于这个电的原因，外滩的很多的一些灯光就灭掉了，但是很多上海市民会说，突然间没有这些花红酒绿的这种感觉，突然间外滩变得高级了。所以我们城市的夜间灯光使用是不是有更好的一个方式，其实也会是有的。 那同样，这个问题不光是一个科技上面的变化，我觉得也会是审美上面的一些变化。就算使用玻璃，它也有很多种使用的方式。那比如说，这是上海的一栋历史建筑里面，它有非常大面积的玻璃，但它使用的釉彩构出来的这个树木其实跟外面的树木是交相辉映，非常漂亮的。那这个是巴黎它的市政使用的这个玻璃围栏，它也没有使用透明的玻璃围栏，而是使用了一个大理石的一个图案的一个玻璃围栏。那同样，荷兰的一所大学它的图书馆，它也有大面积的玻璃，但是它用这些石刻也是做出了一个森林的一个样子。那它的外面其实也是一些树木，所以我们在这个材料的使用上面，其实会有更多的一些方法。那这里面不光是一些科学家需要去提建议，更多的可能是涉及到城市设计者、规划者、艺术家，那所有不同行业可以参与进来。那这个事情其实我觉得对于很多人来说，也许是非常容易解决的一件事，也许对一些人是非常难的一件事，但它绝对是一个可以连接不同行业共同来去想办法推进的事情。那对于城市上面的这个变化，尤其是我认为对于弱势群体的关注，不管是人群还是其他生命的类群，那是代表一个文化真正进步最好的一个考量。那对于生命的尊重，其实最后也可以回馈到我们人类自己的发展当中。所以希望我们通过鸟撞这件事情，渐渐改变人和自然之间的关系，那就从人类最常居住的这个场所开始，城市开始。谢谢大家。
Well, thank you, Bin Bin. I think that was wonderful. I was actually quite shocked by that video early on in your presentation with all those birds flying in to that glass building. But also greatly encouraged by the wonderful efforts by you and also the team of volunteers and others in helping to understand the scale of the issue in China. I know that if I was a government city official, the first questions I would ask about this issue is, show me the evidence that this is a problem, and also show me the solutions of how I can tackle it. And I think what you're doing is addressing both of those questions. And I was really encouraged also by the way you're taking forward collaboration, not just in academic circles. It was great to see the work you're doing with Cornell and others around the world on this issue to share experience, but also the collaboration with academia and other sectors, which I think, as you explained, is so important. Talking to architects and urban planners and everyone. So I think that was really fantastic to complement Andrew's presentation earlier. Now, of course, one of China's cities that lies on a major migratory bird route is Hong Kong. So it's no surprise really that Hong Kong Birdwatching Society, which is one of China's first birdwatching societies, has examined the issue of bird collisions. So I'd like to now invite Huang Xiumei from the Hong Kong Birdwatching Society to present the results of their pilot study.
Good afternoon, everyone, ladies and gentlemen. It is my great pleasure to join this event. And I would like to first thank the hosts and organizers today for inviting us, our organizations to attend this symposium on bird collisions issues. Today, I'm representing the Hong Kong Birdwatching Society to share on the bird collision monitoring campaign in Hong Kong. And my name is Wang Xiumei. Yeah, first of all, I would like to briefly introduce our organizations to you all. We are a non-government organization based in Hong Kong and founded in 1957. And our work ranges from research and regional conservation, and also habitat management and education to conservation policy advocacy. Urban bird strike is also one of the issues that we will touch on. But before I really talk about the bird collision monitoring campaign, I would like to provide you some background about the birds in Hong Kong. When we talk about Hong Kong, I think most of the people will immediately think of the urban landscape, like the photo show here is the skyscrapers along the side of Victoria Harbour. But not many of us will know that Hong Kong is also a place that rich in biodiversity. Like in terms of, in terms of bird species, we have recorded over 570 species in Hong Kong, and it accounts for 40% of the number of species in China and 5% of the world number, which is a very high diversity. But the reason behind this is of course, we are located in the middle of the EAAF, East Asian Australian Flyway. And another reason is that actually Hong Kong has a diverse natural habitats preserved. Like we have two important bird areas recognized by the BirdLife International. The first one is Tai Po Khao, Shing Mun, and Tai Mo Shan area. It covers a secondary forest well protected by the country park system, and the second one is, and the second IBA is the Inner Deep Bay and Shenzhen River catchment area. It covers over 3,000 hectares of wetland habitats in Deep Bay area, and half of the IBA is also recognized as Ramsar site. And apart from the wetland and also the woodland, we also have some open field habitats found, like the paddy fields and wet and dry farmlands in the rural area of Hong Kong. So these kind of habitats also provide a stopover for some globally threatened farmland bird species, like the yellow-breasted bunting. Yeah, now we know that Hong Kong is a hotspot for migratory birds, but at the same time, our question is Hong Kong also a hotspot for bird collisions? Like many other highly urbanized cities around the world, we also believe that Hong Kong has the problem of bird collisions. However, unlike other regions where monitoring and like citizen science and research have been developed for many years, in Hong Kong, we do not have much research on this issue, although we have constantly seen some news in newspaper reporting about the bird collision incident. That is why in 2021, when we were invited to join the global campaign, Global Bird Rescue by the FLAP Canada, we immediately agreed to join, and we promoted the global bird collision mappers via our social media, and also we created a Chinese website page to encourage the local reader to also participate in the reporting of bird collision cases. And last year, we have initiated a bird collision monitoring campaign in Hong Kong, and we recruited over 40 volunteers to conduct the regular surveys at 5 suspected black spots in Hong Kong. And all the volunteers were required to attend our training workshops, and they have to divide into groups, like in 5 groups, and each team were committed to participate in the survey. The intensity is like 3 surveys per month, and they have to do it throughout a year. So it is really a great commitment for them. And in this spring, we have published a very preliminary report on the bird collisions cases in Hong Kong. And these reports consolidate the data collected from both the public members and also from our regular surveys during the period from September to December last year. And we have recorded 196 individuals of birds in these 4 months. And also thanks to our trained volunteers, we could record some of the bird imprints, like the right bottom photo shown in the slide. And when here are some of the summary of our report. You can see we have recorded 19 families and 38 species of birds in these 4 months, and 7 of them are species of conservation concerns. Just take some example is the globally critically endangered yellow-breasted bunting, and also the nationally class 2 protected species, northern bukbuk. You can also look into the right-hand side. The graph shows us the highest, the family with highest counts are the bubu and also the yuhina and white eyes. And in the right-hand side, you can see the top 3 recorded species are Indo-Chinese yuhina, Chinese bubu, and also chestnut bubu. I'm sorry, it's not moving. Okay. Yeah, among the 38 species, we found that 68% of them are migrants. And when we look into the spatial distribution, although our survey intensity varies amongst different sites in Hong Kong, but from this map, we can still see that actually the bird collisions events were widely distributed across different districts in Hong Kong. And we have quickly scanned through the cases, and we found that there are many different types of buildings that could be involved in bird collision events, like the commercial buildings and shopping mall with extensive glass facade or mirror facade, and also transparent noise barrier and transparent railing, or some village low-rise village houses with big window door. And when we look at the seasonal distributions, because we only collected data from 4 months at this moment, we can see that the highest count, the month with highest counts is November, and most of them are winter migrants. Yes, we have published this report, but at the same time, we also did a press conference in Hong Kong, and it received a lot of social media's attentions. Like we have finished 13 interviews, and also there are 20 related news reported in Hong Kong. However, even though we feel that the public are more aware about the issue, we still find it very difficult to persuade different sectors to make an improvement for this problem. Amongst all the follow-up cases we have gone through, I would like to share with you more happy cases in Mayfu, and this is a case of in Mayfu MTR stations, and we found this suspected black spot in 2021. And our volunteers have constantly do survey here, and they also recorded an average of 3 cases per each survey in this station. We have gathered this kind of data and reflected to MTR company. And at the first half years, I think the MTR stations was not very responsive. But after there are many social medias and also media coverage, the MTR station also aware of the problem, and they finally improve all the 100 glasses in MTR station, which is very encouraging, and we really appreciate that. And it is a very great example that can make our volunteer and members feel that their works and support are contributing to a positive change. Oh, sorry. Yes, our works have yield a little positive result, but we know that there are much work to be done. So in the future, we are hoping that we can enlarge our citizen monitoring campaign and do more research. And also, we want to engage more stakeholders and more importantly is to gain the policy support from the government. I believe that in the very near future, we can together build a very safer and harmonious cities for both birds and also humans. Yeah, this is the end of my presentation. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Xiumei. It's really wonderful to see this research happening in Hong Kong and the involvement of the members of the public, and also you linking up to an international campaign as well on this issue. And I hope that you can continue to help build the evidence base with others and also raise public awareness on this important issue. So that brings us to the end of the keynote presentations. And they've, I think, set us up fantastically for the next part of the symposium, which is a panel discussion about integrating biodiversity into cities. So I'm delighted that John McKinnon, or Ma Jingnong, as you will know him, is here to moderate the session. And he will be joined on the sofas by Hu Ping, the Director of Authority for the Guangdong Neilingding Futian National Nature Reserve, Sun Li, the Founder and Deputy Board Chairwoman of the Mangrove Conservation Foundation, and Xiong Jian, Manager of Research and Development at Xianying South Glass Energy Saving Glass Company. And I will also get a chance to sit down and join the panel. But first I'd like to invite John to the podium to give us an introduction to the session. So John.
Thank you, Terry, and thank the organisers of the meeting and the Paulson Institute and other sponsors of this workshop. I'm very happy to come here and talk to you. I'm not really giving any sort of keynote talk, but I'll help Terry because he can be a panelist and I can moderate this session. Well, Li Bingbing has already presented most of what I was going to say, actually, so we can go fairly quickly through these. You've seen enough dead birds. I just wanted to say, how does this work? That's gone very fast. Okay, I just came back from Korea, and I saw one area where they were making and promoting these bird-friendly tapes. So you see these rolls, they're like sellotape and they're very cheap, and you can just buy them and stick them across the windows and you'll make various patterns of dots. If I knew which way, there you are. That one. So it's very easy to get that kind of effect. We saw already in Li Bingbing's this kind of thing, which is very effective in preventing bird strike. And you can get, of course, jumping stickers of raptors to help frighten away birds. But you can also get glass made, which has sort of hidden structures in it. So what people see as glass, you see right through the window. But actually what a bird sees slightly different wavelengths to humans, and they see all sorts of crisscrosses. And I'm sure you could design better things that actually sort of flicker. You know, some crystals that, as you change the angle, the different colors, or they would glow. I see them on tourist pictures. You know, things for catch the eye of tourists. Those things could actually be just built into the glass. Very easy. Now, I wanted to make a couple of other points. One is that the light not only disorients the birds, but it disorients insects. Moths fly at night, and the moth population has also dropped in Europe. It's dropped by 70 or 80% in biomass. And one of the reasons is that the moths fly to artificial lights instead of flying to the moon or wherever they normally want to go. And this is indirectly, of course, affecting birds. Moths is a huge food for birds and other insects that the birds feed on. And China, I feel, has lost an awful lot of insects. And in towns, the town authorities paint insect repellent lime around the trees. They then put plastic strips on the trees so that insects can't climb up and down the trunks. They spray insecticide everywhere. So in China they're fighting a war against insects. Insects are pests, insects are bad, but insects are vital for birds. So that's another thing that towns are responsible for. But lastly, I wanted to mention this, which is one of my pet horrors, which is every time I land on an airport in China, I see these mist nets put up. They're supposed to protect you when you're flying in and out. But I would point out no other country in the world that I know of uses mist nets on airports. They're completely useless and unnecessary. They don't catch the local birds because the local birds have already found out and know the nets are there and avoid them. They catch the migrants. They catch the naive birds that are just sweeping through and boring into a net. And we reckon 20 to 30 million birds a year get killed in this way. There's actually 1,500 kilometers of mist nets on airports in China. Every town has an airport. Every town is doing this, but not Hong Kong. You'll be glad to know. So I just wanted to make that point. There are many other ways that we could make urban areas more bird-friendly. Another point is that what are urban areas? Actually, if you look at the China coast, the East Asian, Australasian flyway, it's one long city. It's one long city from Bohai all the way down to Hainan. There's hardly any not urban parts of the flyway, and they've all got these lights on. If you look at satellite photos of the lights at night of the Yellow Sea, it's actually amazing how much light. And it's not even just on the coast. The fishing boats that are all over the sea fishing for squid and things, they're using lights as well. So the whole area is actually very, very lit up. All right, enough said. We have a panel slide, I think. I don't know whether someone can show that. Do we have a slide for our panel discussion? A background? No, not that one, though. Ah, that one? 漂亮啊. Oh no, 不漂亮. Okay, Terry has already introduced the speakers, so I don't really need to repeat their names, and you've got them in your program. And I will simply ask each speaker in turn sort of simple questions to see some of their ideas of what we could do in China to reduce the mortality, unnecessary mortality of birds in Chinese cities, particularly migratory birds. And as Terry has pointed and other speakers have pointed out, actually these are very cheap and actually cost-saving solutions. And to what extent can we do it? So can I invite the four panelists? Hu Ping, he's the director of the Nailing Ding, nailed it, Nailing Ding Fujian Nature Reserve, National Nature Reserve. Thank you. Sun Li, founder of the Mangrove Conservation Foundation. Xiong Jian, who's one of our glass-making experts, and of course Terry Townsend. What's that? I will need that. Okay, which end do you want me to sit? Here. Terry, if you like to go over there. We're running late. Well, you just stop, or someone stop. Okay. Here we go. I don't know if this thing works. Is this your one? It doesn't work, your one. I swapped it from my. Okay, we would start with Mr. Hu Ping. I don't have a microphone. Terry Stowe. Okay. So Hu Ping, you are director of an important nature reserve in a city, in a big city in South China, but you must know the broader problem. Can I ask you, what sort of measures can a city do to make the city more bird friendly in general, in terms of feeding areas, shelter, water, nesting areas? What sort of measures do you think you could do in, for instance, Shenzhen? Did you understand that?
谢谢啊，这个清楚了啊，谢谢。这个非常高兴啊，今天来参加这个论坛。然后刚才听了两位博士的那个，两位老师的那个讲解，那个主持演讲，收获很大。因为呢，福田呢，我们也正在建这个，在我们福田保护区也正在建博物馆。那博物馆呢，会采取有很多这个玻璃幕墙。那我一直在思考怎么去避免这个问题避免这个发生鸟桩这种事儿。那么我先简单介绍一下我们保护区啊。这个福田红树林保护区呢，84年成立，88年成为国家级。那个我们是在2022年10月份被那个湿地公约指定为那个国际重要湿地。那么它的区位呢是跟香港米埔，就是也是国际重要湿地紧紧相连的，构成了我们这个整个的后海湾的一个国际重要湿地。这里呢也是东亚到澳大利亚西亚的一个候鸟的迁徙路线重要的节点。每年呢有10多万只的这个候鸟在这里停歇和过冬。那么我们福田红树林保护区呢，作为这个重要的节点的一部分呢，我们保护区非常非常小，我们只有这个3.67平方公里，有林面积呢，红树林面积才100平方，这个3.67平方公里，这个有林的面积才1平方公里，就是100公顷，所以非常非常的小。作为一个在城市腹地的保护区，那么我们可能更关注的就是怎么样去保护鸟类。那么我们这些年呢，通过这种基于自然的生态修复、生境改造，还有精细化和智慧化的管理，主要是从以下几个方面去做。第一个呢，就是关于鸟类的食物的来源的方面。我们那个从2014年的5月1号开始，深圳湾是全域禁渔了，这个避免了人鸟争食。然后这是一个。然后第二个呢，我们每年呢定期呢对那个滩涂的那个海桑的幼苗进行清理，这个是避免那个红树林的过度扩张、快速的扩张，侵占滩涂，从而呢保证这个候鸟有足够的觅食空间，这是食物方面。第二个是关于栖息地的保护哈。我们从16年跟那个基金会合作，跟那个红树林基金会合作，我们对我们原有的人工鱼塘进行了一个生态的修复，将它改造成为鸟类的栖息地，那么形成了那个视野开阔，然后并且具有那个深水区域、浅水区域和中央光滩的这样一个不同的深境，然后打通与外海的联系的通道。然后我们也建立了这个智能水闸，然后呢精准的调控水位和这个生物交换，就是说使这个鱼塘变成了高潮位的鸟类的栖息地。这个鱼塘改造完了以后呢，虽然说我们面积不大哈，不到40公顷，但是呢吸引了大量的候鸟。我们做过统计，比原来的种类增加了28种，然后数量呢基本上比原来多了1万多只。然后我们在记录的过程中，我们就发现这个去年的时候有150只的黑脸琵鹭 这个我们整个深圳湾大概一年记录的大概也就是300多400只这样子，但是有150只一个晚上在那里过夜，这是栖息地的保护方面。第二个是关于飞行，这个是刚才几位讲的这个鸟状的问题。我们深圳呢作为一个经济高度发展的城市啊，其实历来非常非常重视鸟类的保护，也重视野生动物的保护。据我所知，我们的超高楼宇在建设的过程中，一定会做一个鸟类评估影响，然后请一些专家过来，要出具这个鸟类评估影响书，然后才可以开始建。这是第一个。第二个呢，在我们保护区啊，我们很早就已经规定，保护区200米以内的建筑不能超过24米，这个是写进了我们规划局的那个法定图则当中啊。然后作为一个城市腹地的这样一个保护区呢，可能面临的就是一个鸟状的问题、玻璃幕墙的问题、灯光影响的问题。那么如何去避免呢？我们这个协调城管、规划、建设等部门呢，我们去减少这个玻璃幕墙，减少这个景观照明，调低这个灯光的亮度，营造一种暗夜保护区。这是第二个。最后一个呢，就是我们也正在编制叫鸟类友好型的城市规划和设计指引。这个呢，就是说是我们正在编制深圳的一个地方标准。目前呢，我们已经完成了这个专家的评审。那么下一步，我们的深圳的市场监督管理局，会按照规定进行发布。这个是为鸟类友好的城市生态提供指引和保障。谢谢。
Thank you, Director Hooping. That's very interesting. And it sounds great. Within the reserve, but can we cover the whole city? I don't know. So I'm going to ask a similar question, to Sun Li. She calls herself Deputy Chairwoman, whatever that is. She's in charge of the Mangrove Conservation Fund. First of all, you saw the wonderful presentation by Andrew Farnsworth. The science depends on accessing radar data, which I'm sure is very secretive in China. Do you think we could do something similar in China to monitor bird migration? And then just as a little sneak question, Terry told me you were considering doing something about mist nets, maybe have a local campaign to try and get the mist nets removed from the airport. Thank you.
谢谢马老师啊，谢谢主持人。刚才实际上听了3位嘉宾，包括那个安卓的发言哈，还有前面3位嘉宾和胡局的发言。我觉得特别振奋啊。对，然后呢，也很高兴红树林基金会呢一直在这个。彬彬老师的指导下哈，过去的那个1年多来哈，一直参与那个防鸟状那个行动网络的相关的工作哈。我是觉得就是那个刚才那个安周教授分享的这个点子非常非常好。然后呢，也很值得我们这个学习和借鉴。将来呢，我是觉得类似的这个科技手段，然后用来我们建立生物多样性友好型城市呢，我想在中国呢，也有可能被学习借鉴和那个推广。因为我举一个就是因为我所生活的这个城市的例子哈，刚才胡局已经介绍了一部分了。其实可能大家关注深圳，可能呢都知道深圳是一个经济高度发达的城市，岂不知呢，深圳在生态保护方面呢，其实也是走在全国前列的。早在80年代，深圳其实就推出了它的生态红线，把50%的陆域面积都划到了生态红线中。这对深圳过去43年的这个城市建设和经济发展，其实在生态保护方面是起到了保驾护航的作用的。这是一个哈，另外一个呢，就是我查了一下哈，深圳在2006年就制定了深圳湾的叫夜景照明规划。在06年就推出了，然后当时就考虑到了深圳湾呢，我们拥有一个全球最袖珍的国家级的保护区，现在已经是国际重要湿地了嘛。考虑到它的特殊性，所以呢，在修这个就是在深圳湾大桥以北的这个 滨海休闲带，也是深圳著名的一个旅游打卡点，现在去深圳都会去的一个地方哈。在那里呢，规定了呢，在那个大海滨休闲带的灯光呢，只提供功能性的灯光，就是没有就是特别亮的这个灯光吧。然后到2013年的时候呢，深圳呢就编制了叫深圳市城市照明专项规划2013至2020，在这个规划中呢，也是那个坚持了以生态优先，因为80年代推出生态红线了嘛，所以呢坚持生态优先。然后当时是划定了这个鸟类的这个聚集区和敏感区在这些区域呢，对灯光也是有些要求的。胡局也做了一些介绍了，比如说我举个例子哈，当时正在建这个深圳湾超级总部基地，然后这个总部基地呢就被要求它的所有的建筑的这个。不能使用这个什么媒体立面外墙不能有激光，然后呢不能有大功率的照明等等然后呢甚至它现在整体的亮度呢大家去看就知道了，比深圳普通的建筑的灯光还要低暗20%。这个都是对深圳湾的一个保护吧。然后在2021年的时候呢，又重新制定了编制了就是这个深圳市的这个照明专项规划，是2022到2035。在这个规划中呢，就进一步刚才胡局讲了，划定了暗夜保护区包括这个保护区在内的还有一些区域对。然后暗夜保护区呢，也提出了暗夜保护区保护的具体的要求对，然后呢，特别是提出了这个绿色照明和城市低碳可持续发展我觉得因为那时候已经有了双碳目标嘛，所以呢，进一步把这个城市的生物多样性保护和实现气候目标相结合了吧我觉得在这个其他城市可能我可能也不了解哈，没有看到就是比深圳还更具体的这样的一些这个从政策方面的这样的一些法律法规吧哈。然后其他城市呢，刚才我听彬彬教授介绍哈，其实也有一些不同的做法，比如说上海上海是今年实行了新修订的上海市环境保护条例然后新增的一个重要内容就是光污染防治相关措施。所以我觉得像上海和深圳这样处在东亚奥莱利亚迁飞区的重要的超大人口超过2000万人口、经济高度发达的这样的沿海城市我觉得如果能在这个城市发展人的需求和生物多样性保护、鸟的保护、生物友好型城市方面做一些工作，做出一些示范，那整个在迁飞区也是可以推广的，也是会有益的示范吧所以呢，我坚信王老师我坚信未来无论是国际上和国内无论是什么样的先进方法，只要是对建设生物多样性友好型城市有益的深圳政府包括民间社会都是愿意推动的谢谢。
Thank you to Lily that added more to what Chairman Wu gave us. We apparently have to break slightly. We have a message coming as a video. Do you want us to sit back there? It'll go on there. Sorry, I'm not using microphone. We have to have a little break for a message from Wang Shi, the founder of Vanke, one of our sponsors.
Yeah, just a slight change of program because Mr. Wang Shi, who is, as you know, a very VIP, as we say, he is actually at the airport due to board a flight, and he was due to give the closing remarks. But given that we are running a bit behind schedule, we will go directly to Mr. Wang Shi for his remarks next, and then we will continue the panel discussion after Mr. Wang Shi's remarks. Now, Mr. Wang Shi will need no introduction in China, of course, but to those from outside China, Mr. Wang Shi is the founder and honorary chairman of China Vanke Company Limited and chairman of the board of Vanke Foundation. He founded Vanke in 1984 and grew the company to be the world's largest residential home developer and a Fortune 500 company. He has a long-standing reputation for environmental leadership and is also a world-class adventurer, having scaled Mount Everest's north and south slopes and become only the 11th person in the world to accomplish the 7+2, that is, reaching the highest 7 summits in 2004 and both North and South Poles in 2005. So it gives me great pleasure to invite Mr. Wang Shi to deliver his remarks.
好，大家听到？好，谢谢。整个。身份的，欢迎两位保护经验，当然还有国际上第一这个今天由于多次听到我们家人呢提到温蒂的名字，那我也是感到很亲切。就是在如何说，在中国的推动环保生态、候鸟保这方面呢，温蒂呢也是对深圳的公益基金会的。记得面临的新人就接受之后呢，一直是知道，包括到现在，所以感到参加这个会议，虽然不在现场，是感到非常亲切的。我想在这里，就作为一个中国改革开放来一个中国的企业家，如何走上环保之路，就是和鸟类保护、鸟类和城市的鸟类保护的。把它结合起来呢，把它们我的一个心理过程和这样一个认知吧。首先第一点呢，因为我现在年纪比较大就是容易经历的多，也容易回忆。一回忆的就是第一个想说的，36年前，那就是1987年。我知道深圳呢，也就是80年才创立，83年就成立。87年发生一个什么事儿呢？发生一个就是深圳要决定研究建立深圳机场。当时呢引起报纸上的一个讨论。当然我就是我的做的企业和影响很大，但是显然影响非常深刻的是，当时呢机场的选址呢，一个就是在现在的深圳有一个后龙保护区。还是高，再一个呢，就是离当时建设的宝安，最后可以说是真正的这个决定了就是这么阶段地方的保护百姓呢，保护团队的人一起。第一个就是这么大队的呢，福建的机场的噪音影响教学，他就说影响教学就决定教学楼宿舍楼全安装双重玻璃，就是解决这个噪音。当然问题来了。另外一个就是这个在对外对面呢，就是香港的米埔呢，香港的自然保护区，其中米埔方面呢，就是香港的有关方面组织提出强烈的不同意见，就是影响候鸟的迁徙，就这种噪音后就不可能迁徙了。种种原因吧，最后还有这个地方放弃。我们可以设想一下，如果不放弃。整个现在深圳呢，这么作为一个名片的公众保护地，那这个可以说就是这一次争论，这一次的就是这样的一个事件吧，给我的作用非常好的一次自然一个教育、环保一个教育，可以说这个呢是给我带印象让我非常深刻的。这是我想说的第一件事，说到这里就说了，特别感谢，当然感谢最后深圳政府的最后这个决策，当然是国务院的决策，因为当时呢就要建立机场， 要重视的。好，我这个长话不说了啊，就是这里非常感谢深圳，感谢WCF，因为这是WCF香港的主旗舰的保护项目，还有今天就是成为深圳建立这几个开放，如果在环保生态，就是关心鸟类的这样一个生态健康的状况，尤其是候鸟，这方面呢，应该是香港的宇宙给深圳特区、给中国的大陆做出这个先行的示范，有感作用。这是我想说的一点快。那在之后呢，因为这样的一个影响，我就知道了，整个在中国在关心候鸟，后来才发现，中国当时普遍就对候鸟这个来讲大自中国的饮食习惯呢，这个呢，其中很多不好的，其中一个就是吃飞禽走兽，飞禽当中呢，这样的吃这样各种鸟类，如何的关不能。就是在90以上的世纪，去关心咱们这个主要是鄱阳湖的，之后再和北京大学几个大学的合作呢，在有人呢研究候鸟的经济，关注这个事情。但是显然呢，觉得当时作为一个企业家，在社会呼吁的杯水车薪的影响是非常有限，所以是到了进入了21世纪吧，2004年。成立了中国企业家的第一个环保组织阿拉善，简称的 SDG。简单，这个阿拉善是保护沙漠上的生物多样性。显然，当时呢，我是例如呢，就是候鸟、鸟类这么一个保护。显然呢，我当时呢也是声音呢作用有限，也没得到积极的响应。那就是说的应该是2004年，但是4年之后，2013年，我就来发起在深圳成立就是红土林保护基金会，主要的保护就是候鸟。当然没有想到现在和双碳、绿色低碳，那么保护红土林本身也是非常好的一个自然，不仅是生物多样性不战胜，不仅仅是保护这样免受灾害。在同时呢，也成了这个候鸟的这样栖息地。在这里呢，不妨再简单我这样的感受一下，自己是在做什么？应该说的举一个例子，万科做什么？现在我在做什么？就是呢，我记得很清楚，2007年在探讨如何建立万科的新总部大厦，也就是在现在的深圳的里面，盐田的大梅沙那里建万科大厦。就非常重要的就是如何生物多样性，如何保护野生动物，这就成为一个这个大的一个主题话题。长话短说，就是现在这个大厦，首先来讲如何保护，就防撞。我们说现在的大厦，包括万科大厦也是多级大厦，如何防撞呢？当然，我们采取的措施呢，多种因素采取的措施呢，就是一定就是把这个遮阳板，一个是外遮阳板，一个内遮阳板。显然，外遮阳板的保护和成本呢比内遮阳板呢成本要高，这个来保护，就是来这个物业管理方面，内遮阳板的一些。但是我决定采用外遮阳板，为什么呢？外遮阳板显然玻璃的那个凸透性没有了，当然成本也更高。现在可以说这也成了一个典型的样板。到现在就是。就是大厦绝没有这个因为玻璃透明以为是不够的这样错觉的人，别说绝无仅有的。第二个再说一下，仅仅是保护鸟类，而且因为对自然现在还要保护，就是其中一个课题就是城市的如何保护野生动物。鸟类候鸟这是野生动物野生最近的一个，是吧？如何？城市里的保守层啊，刺猬啊、蜜蜂啊、蝴蝶呀、等等这些，就生物多样性保护野生动物。在这方面，再一次感谢WCF对万科一直指导。在这里，这种大厦可以来怎么说呢？ 这里不仅仅是一个鸟类的乐园，用它们的东西嘛，在整个大厦的整个顶层70平方米吧，就是不仅仅建了光花景点，而且还建设了很多的生物、地生物的各种植物可抓的，就像是蜜蜂采蝴蝶飞舞，而且很多的鸟类都出现在地方。不好说是一个很有意思的现象，因为现在很多家里头，比如说圈养一些很多的那种宠物的小鸟，很多有翼飞的嘛，就不是飞了。翼飞的小鸟对我的具体的哪呢？不具体到我们的北门上的那个顶层花园，没人干扰，在那里成的一个乐园。比如说鹦鹉八哥我想看这些小鸟，当然不是好鸟了，是这个留鸟，当然都在这里非常丰富的看到。在这里我们再说一下，就在这方面真的就受了一个组织的影响，我体会呢很大。这个叫 SDI 呢就是 social product nature history， 就是以色列的社会环境、社会自然保育。这个组织是有几个原因。这一讲了我在以色列和他们打交道的一个感受。第一个，他们提出课题如何城市的一个保育，这个概念对我来讲非常新。那我们不妨举个例子，它的就是在耶路撒冷有2个保护栖息地，一个呢鸟类，这个鸟类栖息地在什么地方呢？就是在国会大厦下面呢，道德法院国会大厦的一个小地上，下面一块砖，可以说是有2平方米，我们知道一个保护地2平方米，但是在那里，鸟类的研究、鸟类的教育各方面做的，让你感到非常上瘾。你比如说，它的就有一个3年的一个愿望，非常大的，它这叫研究嘛，鸟类当然不是在那里呢，粘到网上，那科研人之间拿一套方法做记号，在鸟的脚上，它这个绿的标签这你记录是不是飞过来的，是什么时候登记的，没登记在这个标签。在这个过程当中，就是科研科普的下面，但是很多来讲的志愿者呢，就是材料比如做个利益的介绍，在他们整个的各方面的社会的，就是社会的分开的关注环境的保护、弱势群体的和大自然保护一块，他们成为积极的志愿者，一块结合起来做，这个印象非常深刻。再一个，比如说这里有个叫做羚羊谷地，羚羊谷地什么？就是保护野生羚羊的。你怎么会想到在耶路撒冷，就是这么一个非常小的地方，它当然也就是应该说不超过200米吧，就2边全是高楼大厦，高速公路就这样的地方，就是因为有些野生羚羊。以色列这个希伯来政府，不是希伯来耶路撒冷政府已经批准发展商在这建一个高档的一个别墅区，就是2000套，这在以色列来讲非常大的开不起。当然就是环保组织人士、当地的居民就是反对的，诉讼了10几年，打上了保护野生羚羊。现在轮到以色列去，你再看看这个野生羚羊，局部对野一般是在东非大陆，但上来2倍尺的各方面看，就如何来层次保护。觉得我确实是在保护鸟的经济，还有和其他更多样性环境，尤其是城市呢这方面，各个国家非常好的经验。中国呢，应该是这个中国的文明传统是和自然叫天人合一。但是确实的国际化以来呢，我们对这个自然的破坏，我们进入现代化，城市方面呢对自然的忽略。你看在这方面，我们开始反思，就如何来自然保护。在这方面呢，应该是国际上的NGO 组织，这方面呢，应该中国呢这方面本地 支持、资助、帮助，应该是在这里呢，我这里表示衷心的感谢。同时，应该在面对未来呢，中国应该不仅在经济发展方面，应该在环境保护方面，应该更多的做出自己的贡献，不仅仅是我们要把我们的做好，更多应该和国际上成果更多的人一块儿，我们到发展中国家，我们在一块儿来推环境保护，推动保护鸟类，尤其推动呢，如何在现在城市化屋顶大厦这些的，咱们对鸟类的保护，这是我说的。衷心的谢谢你们。
Well, that was certainly a very inspiring intervention from Mr. Wang Shi. He is an absolute sort of hero and model of how industrialists or private sector can really take a role in conservation and support. And he's supported a lot of these meetings, worked with Paulson Institute on other meetings, and we hope he has a very safe flight. We will now continue with our little panel discussion. I'd like to ask a very different kind of question to Mr. Song Jian, who works in the private industrial section also. You have seen the importance of glass in this. I'm told, I don't know if it's true, but I'm told that China makes and uses more glass than the rest of the world put together. So there's a lot of glass up there, and it's potentially very dangerous. What could the glass industry do to help to reduce the risk to birds? And what would you need in terms of either technology or legislation or government support or new regulations? What would it take to force the glass industry or to encourage the glass industry to really make windows that allow people to look out but don't they don't attract birds to smash in there?
这个建筑玻璃产品啊，就是在我们的技术手段，通过解决防止鸟类撞击的技术手段非常丰富。比如说彩釉、印刷、贴纸，还有我们的镀膜，它的图案也是各式各样的。就是说，兰博集团它已经开发出了多种技术路线及多款产品推向市场。因为在我们北美地区，因为兰博集团面向的是整个全球，它在北美地区也有这种需求，这是第一点。第二点就是说，最主要的一个层面就是说，需要建筑公司的一个介入，因为在一些建筑的设计层面上，它比如说建筑的外形、建筑的遮阳构型，还有一个就是镜面反射，还有就是与它的镜面反射与绿色的绿色林地的一个形成等措施的一个保护吧，就是说这样把建筑公司纳入进来之后，它更能友好的保护一下那个鸟类。还有就是至于纳入标准的话，就是说，目前还要深入的进行一个研究，因为什么呢？在目前的研究数据啊，从李冰冰博士，还有就是不能很明显的分类出这些撞击是哪一类的撞击。假如说，这需要玻璃的鸟类的研究机构联合玻璃企业共同建立科学的一个方法，就是说进行一个鸟类的研究，就是说同时建立一个数据库吧。在以上工作完成后啊，就是说才能建立一个科学严谨的一个标准。好，谢谢。
Thank you, Mr. Song Jian, for this information I'm very happy to hear that you can make better types of glass. I hope that other glass makers and manufacturers and marketers will follow this lead, but I do think the government could take a role in regulations and principles about design that can take into account the need of birds. China, after all, is still the president of the CBD, the Convention on Biological Diversity, and your president, Xi Jinping, has been promoting greenness, ecological redlining, and the new idea of ecological civilization. And these are all fine words and concepts and policies, but China really has to show, what does this mean? How are you making this an ecologically civilized country, and how can you give leadership to the rest of the world? Finally, I'd like to come back to Terry, who's spoken quite a lot, but he's always got good things to say, and I'm choking to death. How we heard some examples today, and Mr. Wang Shi gave more, where local petitions and if the local citizenry voice their demands for environmental protection, they can actually guide local governments, they can cancel projects, they can perhaps divert projects from an environmentally sensitive area to a less sensitive area. So what lessons do you have for us about how do we motivate people, spread awareness, and actually empower the people to voice their preferences and views?
Yeah, thank you. Well, I think public engagement is an element that's come through in nearly all of the presentations today, the importance of public engagement. And there's no doubt that a more aware public will support more environmentally literate policies. So, there's a very famous quote that everyone wants to protect what they love, but they can only love what they know. And so I think there's quite strong evidence that when people are more aware of the wildlife, the nature that they have around them, the more they support policies and measures to protect them. And I think migratory birds in particular have a very, very good track record of inspiring people and motivating action. So just for example, last year, the New Zealand ambassador was so inspired by the journey of the bar-tailed godwit, which is one particular shorebird species. And just to explain why she was inspired by this bird migrates from non-breeding grounds in New Zealand to the Yellow Sea, non-stop, where it will fuel up, and for the second leg of the journey to Alaska. And it breeds in Alaska, and then after breeding, it will fly non-stop 8 days, 8 nights to New Zealand. And scientists used to think that this journey was impossible for a bird that size to do non-stop. And that was before they studied it on the breeding grounds to work out how it did this, because satellite tracking showed that it did indeed do this journey non-stop. And what they found was that after breeding in Alaska, this bird is like a transformer. So I think most people will have heard of the Transformers, these robots that change into a car or an aeroplane. Well, the bar-tailed godwit is the original transformer. So what it does in Alaska, it's an eating machine. It eats and eats and eats, and it doubles its body weight because fat is the fuel for the journey to New Zealand. But then just before it takes off, it does something remarkable. it shrinks its digestive organs and stomach because it doesn't need them for 8 days and 8 nights. It's extra weight. And the heart doubles in size to pump blood to the wing muscles to power this incredible journey from Alaska to New Zealand. And then, of course, when it arrives, it transforms itself back from a flying machine to an eating machine. And it has to eat and eat to recover from the journey. So the New Zealand ambassador was so inspired by this bird that she said, well, we really need to do more to help these migratory birds along their journeys. And so she got together all of the ambassadors in Beijing from the flyway countries. So from Russia, America, Australia, New Zealand, Japan, Singapore, Malaysia. She got them all together to have a workshop to raise awareness about the migratory birds that are shared by all these countries. You know, they're not owned by any one country, they're shared. And so with that, there is a shared responsibility, you know, to protect them. And so she elevated this issue of migratory birds that traditionally, you know, has not been a diplomatic or foreign policy issue. She was elevating this issue to that level to get more attention. And then more than that, she said, well, maybe there's more we can do ourselves. So she started this initiative called Ambassadors for Nature, where the ambassadors in Beijing are committing to manage their own green spaces in Beijing in a more environmentally friendly way. For example, by reducing chemicals, planting native pollinator species, and so on. And now there are 35 embassies in Beijing that have signed up to this initiative. So migratory birds inspire people to do incredible things. And I think the more we can raise awareness about this incredible miracle that happens over our head as we sleep at night, it will inspire people from all different sectors, and we'll be very surprised at what emerges. And I think at the end, perhaps the biggest thing will be to build that support and pressure on governments and business to do more to protect the migratory birds as people fall in love with them. So I think the lesson is migratory birds inspire people to do incredible things. So we've got to make more people aware. Thank you.
Okay, thank you, Terry, for that information and these ideas. I live alone, so I sometimes switch on the television. It's very difficult in China to find anything I want to look at. But channels 9 and 10 sometimes have nature programs, and they're very high quality programs. But I am absolutely sick of watching lions killing antelope and crocodiles eating wildebeests. I think you can watch that every night. Or hyenas stealing the meal from the lions. It just goes on and on and on. Yes, Africa's great, but so is China. And you know, we could be putting out more relevant material on television in China. I think the number of bird lovers, bird watchers in Europe was stimulated by early programs on television and also with spokesmen. So they would identify with Peter Scott explaining about the birds. In China, there isn't a Peter Scott, there isn't a David Attenborough. I think that's a missing element. That would help transmit to public opinion, I think. We could talk all night. You might be willing to give up dinner. But I think some people would like to stop. So I think we have to call it a day and wrap it up. And we have some closing remarks from our sponsors.
Thanks, John. I thought you were putting yourself forward for a new job as China's David Attenborough. Well, thanks very much to John for chairing that interrupted panel discussion, but I think it was interrupted for a good reason. So, and thank you also very much to our panelists for the really fantastic insights that have helped add colour to the event today. And regarding to Mr. Wang Shi, I thought it was wonderful to hear such commitment from a top business leader. Because the truth is that if we're going to meet the goals of the Paris Agreement on climate change and the Kunming-Montreal Global Biodiversity Framework, it's going to take a monumental effort involving both national and provincial governments, businesses, academia, cities, communities, everywhere. And that's why I think this symposium that brought together representatives from all of these sectors to help build a common vision was so important today. And I know that this is a platform on which all of the partners involved are going to build in the months and years to come. So on behalf of the Paulson Institute, I'd like to thank once again the hosts and organisers of this event, the Mangrove Conservation Foundation, Cornell Lab of Ornithology, Duke Kunshan University, Vanke Foundation, the Inner Mongolia Lao Nu Foundation, the Yancheng Wetland and Natural Heritage Site Management Centre, Eco Foundation Global. And on behalf of all of us, thank you so much for participating and for listening. Thank you. 谢谢大家。